So today we are going to be talking about cost saving strategies in audit prep. And we're going to be a little bit more practical this time around. Yeah, I feel like we've been talking about audit prep for quite some time, but guess what? It's because it's important. People should be thinking about it now. And yeah, it's coming up. Audit season is coming. And this time, though, we brought a guest with us. So, Danielle, we don't really actually introduce ourselves on this podcast, but I feel like since it's your first time, I should thoroughly embarrass you. And so Danielle Lewis, she's a director here at Zeroed In Consulting, and she's pretty much a wizard when it comes to, or a witch. I'm not sure. Can I don't know. I'm not even gonna go down that route. We'll just go with it. Anyways.
Embarrassing intro achieved. Nicely done.
Yeah. But I don't know if it's embarrassing for Danielle or for me. But this is gonna go up just to let you guys know. Like I am not cutting this out. Anyways, welcome, Danielle.
Thank you.
So let's just dive right in, right? So audit prep, all about cost savings, right? But I feel like there's a couple different ways to kind of maybe skin this cat. And one of them would be like the direct cost, like the actual dollars. But I also think there's some like indirect costs when it comes with time. And so, I'll just open it up to kind of both of you and just say, like, what are some of the things that we can kind of focus on now, or companies can kind of focus on now to help kind of save on both those direct and indirect costs?
Yeah, and maybe I'll kick it off, and Danielle layer in as you think fit. But this is gonna be wild. But I just kind of like considered it. I just went to the dentist like earlier this week, so get ready for a dentist analogy. But like it actually ties in pretty well because you think about it, like there's the stuff you can do now, and there's the stuff that you can do like at the time of the appointment, right? So like if you're doing your the right hygiene, right, you're brushing your teeth, you're doing your flossing, that can save a lot of pain and sorrow for when you get to the dentist appointment versus if you don't, right? And all of a sudden you get in there and they say, oh, by the way, you've got 3 cavities, you got, a deep cleaning you got to do, we got to numb you, got to do a root canal. None of that sounds fun. All of that gets really expensive, and a lot of that could be avoided, right? And so that's the way that I think about it. Is there's a prevention element to this, and a lot of times I feel like accounting can be like going to the dentist pain wise, but I would put it that way of really kind of looking to do what you can do now rather than later on, right?
I was
Yeah.
not expecting a dentist analogy. I will say that, but you know what? I like it. Danielle, what's up?
I was just going to say, accounting is one of those areas where you have the ability to plan, right? You might enter into different transactions throughout the year, and there might be more that you have to analyze that is unique. But for the most part, year end, the mechanisms of year end, right? You know what's coming, you know how to prepare. And so, why not kind of do those things before kind of you hit January and then you're in this like mad dash where it absolutely has to be done because nobody wants to do that.
Yeah. I mean, accounting is all like backwards looking. It's not like forward looking. So it's like you already know what's happened in your fiscal year. So why not try and get ahead of a lot of the things that may be material or the things that are higher risk and do some interim testing? Because using Kyle's analogy, a cleaning is going to be a lot less expensive than a root canal. But for whatever reason, people just love paying for root canals. Again, using that beautiful analogy.
You're welcome. Yeah. And what you were talking about, John, right? Like there's the cost, like that can be a really expensive thing in terms of dollars and cents, but oh my gosh, the pain that goes with it, right? Like same thing, same dentist analogy. Like you're in that chair and it hurts when you're doing that. It's the same situation if you're waiting until year end and all of a sudden all of the requests, all of everything is sitting there, and there's all of the back and forth between an audit team with a client team, and like there is so much like mental indirect cost of like that time and effort and headache that goes into it. So there's multiple aspects. I think you made a good point of introducing it that way.
Yeah. I mean, I usually it's too early to kind of pitch zeroed in services, but because this is so like on point, I was on a call with a client this week and they had just finished their quarterly review. And I just asked them like how it went, and they were like, "Oh my God, it was great. They had no questions. It went super smooth." And funny enough, we've been with that client for almost a year and a half now. And when we started with them, that wasn't the case. There was a lot of issues surrounding them. And so it was just nice to hear that, like, yeah, with the proper preparation, with the proper like understanding of what's to come, like it actually can be a really smooth process. It doesn't have to just be an absolute nightmare that people like, like the scary like Sundays that people get. Like it doesn't have to be like that. So it was just nice to kind of hear that, yeah, if you do actually prepare for it, it's not as bad as people like make it out to be.
Yeah. And
So
to your point, oh, I was just going to say, John, with, our services, or, I mean, even if someone does it internally, right? It's more kind of playing offense versus defense, right? You're able to kind of pick up those complex topics and handle them now versus later. And I think, it's always more beneficial to play offense versus defense, right?
yeah,
So
100%. Just being proactive is like it's just so much better. Nice. All right. Well, let's maybe kind of shift gears a little bit. So, we've obviously talked about starting early, but like, why is it important to start early? Why can't people wait until January? Like, I clearly know the answer to this, but I just kind of maybe want to like tee it up as like, why should people not wait until January or February or March? Like, why start now in November or even October and December, stuff like that?
they
Yeah.
can, we just wouldn't suggest it, right? Not only is, your team likely your accounting team, right, already working, long days, weekends potentially, right? So the later you start, it just extends those hours even more. So not only does it hurt internally potentially on your team, but your auditors are at a higher cost. Their rates are increased during peak season, which is going to be the time of your audit, right? And so you're not only paying more for services by waiting, but you're just adding stress to your team as well. So I think it's kind of a twofold there of why you wouldn't want to wait until after year end.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, just think about, if you're starting to go in and start doing some of these processes early on, right? Like if you're doing that reconciliation at year end, right? Okay, I gotta, get my balances to match up to what we have out there. Doing an entire year of transactions is a very painful process. Versus starting that earlier on, right? Because early on is where you're going to find where the issues come up, and so if you can find those issues early on, you can be aware of them at the very least, or resolve them and reduce the number of reconciliations, reconciling items, things like that come up. And again, it reduces the time that you have to do it at the end, not just because you have a year's worth of transactions, but also because maybe you have fewer overall because you've been able to go in there and do some of that repair.
Yeah. And I mean, all of that comes from the ability to like leverage your in-house staff, right? So if you start earlier, you're actually able to save money, time, resources, bandwidth, whatever you want to call it. And like that's the beauty of it. So like right now, if people were to actually start on all of their major transactions, like there's maybe a lull right now, right? The holiday season is coming up. I'm sure like things are going to be a little bit quieter, but this is a really good time to get all your process docs kind of in line. And so maybe let's kind of touch on that a little bit. Like why is it important to, additionally, why is it important to continue to like think about starting now with in-house staff being kind of the primary goal here? Like why not just outsource it and just, not have to deal with it?
Yeah. I mean, you've got the in-house staff there, right? Like they're there, they're ready to work on these types of things. And a lot of this stuff, like will come in, and the higher level resource that has to work on this, the higher their cost, right? Whether that's from an outsourced, dollars perspective, or just needing to work with that time. So a lot of this stuff we don't have to do, or an accounting expert doesn't have to do, right? It's matching transactions, it's investigating things. Like those are very much areas where an in-house staff is actually better served to handle a
Yeah.
lot of that. And so, we can do it, don't get me wrong, but we don't have to, right? And if you've already got somebody there, if you're already paying the payroll or, the salary of that person, why not dedicate that time to them?
Yeah.
Yeah. I was gonna say, they also know, potentially your financial statements best, right? Someone like us can, we can learn it, right? But that takes time. Every, I think, year comes with its own challenges. And so, learn from those challenges. Look at your prior year audit or your most current, quarterly review and think about, where were those pain points? Is there anything I can do to prepare better, build in check figures, little things that you could do to just make your life easier in the long run. And again, the people that are going to know that best are the people that did the work and answered those auditors' questions, right?
Yeah. No, that's 100% true. And like I feel like most people tend to underestimate the amount of time needed to complete some of these tasks, right? So everyone in, that's currently working in an accounting department already has like a day job. And on top of that, when all of these compliance and regulatory, checklist items comes through, that's added on top of what they're already doing. So I feel like if you kind of started off a little earlier, you're able to kind of spread that work out a little bit more. You're able to even take an inventory and like actually like, as a project manager, kind of like project out what it's going to take to accomplish some of this stuff. And I feel like that's just an afterthought a lot of the times as opposed to something that comes like beforehand. So nice. All right. So let's maybe kind of talk about some common pitfalls to avoid. So, we're all former auditors here. We've also been a part of many, audits, whether we were auditors or whether we were helping companies or whether we were in a company. So I'm just curious kind of like what everyone's, biggest common pitfall that we should avoid or that companies should avoid.
Yeah, maybe the first one for me is prioritization, right? That's the biggest one. So, because think about it, come audit time, you're going to work with your auditors, and those auditors are going to provide you with their PBC list, right? That long list of requests and information that they need. And don't get me wrong, it's going to happen, right? Like, regardless, you're going to have all that information that you need to provide. And it's very difficult to tackle everything all at once, right? If you try to do everything all at once, you're only going to get a few things out. And I think where we see a lot of clients fall into issues is when they focus on the wrong things. For example, if it's a very simple request item, I always kind of compare this to like in a like a fixed asset register, right? That's relatively easy to pull. You can probably get that out, but maybe that's not a high risk area of the audit, right? That's going to get knocked out by the auditor relatively quickly. Meanwhile, you're sitting, on that revenue detail, which is probably one of the highest, items that you need to be focusing on. And the longer that you sit on that and not get that to the auditors, like the longer it's going to take to get to the end, and all of that's going to get jammed into a small period of time because, not only do they need to make sure that it ties out, they got to take samples from that. They have to do testing on those samples, right? And so these aren't things that you would necessarily know right at the beginning of a project, like when you get that PBC list. So it's very much so also working with your auditors to understand what are those things, and hopefully if you have a really good audit team, they're setting some of these due dates and priorities as part of it. But if they're not, having those conversations, like what do you need first and foremost for us to really get things going? Because you're not going to be able to provide everything 100% on time, right? What are the things that are going to minimize the delays and the additional costs when you miss?
Yeah. I mean, I'll plug interim testing again. High risk area like revenue, you like the auditor shouldn't be looking at your entire year's worth of revenue at the audit. Like they can be looking at 3/4 of it before the audit and then the last quarter during the audit. Like that alone is going to save you a bunch of time. And they're going to already get familiarized with the way that your revenue is being recognized. So it's going to be like less back and forth, right? Like just simple things like that, I think can make a huge difference. And the only thing that I kind of want to add to your pile, Kyle, is that it's like clear communication with the auditor too, right? So if things are coming down and they have a PBC list of all these things that need to come by, be open and clear with them of like things that you can get to them, things that you can't get to them, so then they can go and structure their audit appropriately, because sometimes what's happened with me a bunch of times has been like, here's 75 different things. It's like, well, that's great, but I can't get through 75 things at once. I would have liked 5 at a time. So then as you're, creating them, I'm working through them. So I don't know. I feel like if there was clear communication, it would help make the audit process a lot smoother.
Yeah, definitely. You took a couple of the words out of my mouth, but I think kind of with communication, right? It's also like quality versus quantity. By all means, you're definitely going to still have to get the entire PPC list to your auditors, but like spending the time and making those realistic deadlines, right? Because as former auditors, right? Sometimes there's, just an extraction from a system where it's just raw data. You don't know what the data is. You don't know how it ties back. You don't know what it's for. And, from the quality side, like spending a little bit more time on what you're actually giving your auditors. You don't have to spend, excessive amounts of time, right? But making it a little prettier where, you know what that data is, formatting it appropriately, tying it back to where it's supposed to tie back to, because making those little steps is just going to save not only you time, but your auditor's time of asking a bunch of questions on something they've received just because it's a bunch of data and they don't know what it is. Because that's not really helpful either.
Yep, for sure. Awesome. No, these are all really good things to kind of try and avoid. And maybe I kind of want to flip it on its side now and kind of say like, but what are some good things that we've seen? So what are like some success stories or some, good processes from companies that either we've worked with or that we've audited that we're like, oh yeah, this is A plus, like definitely do this.
Yeah, I'll do one low hanging fruit that anybody can do, and I think this is becoming more of a regular occurrence with audit teams and things like that. Recurring calls, like recurring weekly calls. John just talked about that clear communication with auditors. The best way that you can do that is having a recurring call but between the two teams, right? And don't get me wrong, I'm not a big meeting guy. I don't want to have a ton of meetings on my calendar, but they tend to be the most high value touch points between those two teams, right? Versus having these emails going back and forth and trying to figure things out. Get on a call, hammer it out, and it's like that is when you are able to very easily and very quickly see what are the biggest bottlenecks, right? It's easier than looking at this 100 item list on your computer screen and saying, where do I begin? You're actually having you're getting the guidance that you need to know what's holding things up and where to focus your time.
Yep. Couldn't agree more.
I would say, yeah, I would say, spending time on document prep. A lot of that can happen now, right? Rolling forward your dates, getting your check figures in line of, just trying to prepare, whether it's, using some sort of software or even just yourself using Excel or something like that. But kind of having that prepped now to be able to just data input in the future. The less manual that you're doing, right? When you're working those long days and it is busier and there is a deadline quickly approaching, it just leaves you less room for errors, right? And so any of that you can build out now will be very beneficial to your team.
Yeah, agreed. On that same note, there's a common term that auditors use called Sally, same as last year, right? And so I want to throw into kind of the pile here that it's like consistency is also really good. So if you have a fixed asset schedule that looks one way one year and then another way another year, it's kind of a pain in the butt because the auditor has to kind of almost re-audit the way that you're doing things. But if it's structured similarly to how it was last year, then they can almost kind of like take the work that they've already done and use that as as like a template. Because, let me pull the curtain a little bit. It's like most of this stuff is being done by like a first year associate, maybe a second year associate, and they may not know exactly what they're doing the first time around, right? So if it looks similar to how it was last year, they can kind of work through it a lot faster and a lot better. And honestly, that makes a big difference when it comes to like audit. So like when I was, auditing, I think the clients that were consistent, like those are always really good to be on. The ones that like, wait, this is a revenue detail that doesn't look anything like what we've ever seen. Like, what even is this? Like, because as an auditor, sometimes you don't even know if that's like the right piece of information, right? So that would be my kind of thing is try and keep the processes consistent. And if they're not, then just be upfront about them. And let them know like, hey, we have a new ERP system, and hopefully you let them know before the audit if you got a new ERP system. But been there too. So, um,
Yeah, I
anyways,
think it's always nice. I kind of did this on both sides, on the audit side and then also kind of in industry, but just sit down with your auditors, walk them through it, right? Like it's okay if it changed, if you're bettering something, but why just send that off in an email when you can, have a 15-20 minute conversation, whether it's screen sharing or in person, and say, this is how it was, this is why it's better now, this is how it ties out, have that conversation, and then it will lead to so many less questions
yeah,
that is only painful for both of you. So, just keeping that communication open.
yeah. I remember as like an auditor, one of my seniors once said, like, just get up and go talk to them. And I'm like, but I can't. What do you mean? So I do feel that like I feel like that's really important just to be able to like sit down and have them like explain it to you as opposed to like just sending emails back and forth. So anyways, cool. Any final thoughts before we cut it out?
No, nothing major. I mean, it's what we've been talking about here, right? It's that maintenance, it's doing it early on. And it's like I think if there was one thing that I could get across in this call, it's, and we've said this on past calls as well, right? Like auditors are not your adversaries. Like they're the other side of the team that's wanting to get this done. Trust me, they want to spend as little time during after year end as you do. And they're going to be happy to do things that make it that way, right? That includes, lowering audit fees when it comes to accelerating a lot of work into interim. It's going to come with, being available to give initial feedback on like complex topics without, dinging you right off the gate. So use them as like collaborate, use them as your team, and I think that just raises your best chances for success.
Yeah. I'll just end with, audit prep is important because it just reduces the costs, not just, financially, but also like when it comes to your team's time, bandwidth, burnout. Like there's so much that goes into that, even like when discrepancies come in and you have to kind of figure that out with the auditors. I feel like doing that early is way better than doing that a week before filing, right? That becomes a high stress situation. So start early, continue to maintain accurate financials, document your processes, and honestly, use your in-house staff as much as you can. Plan it out. But and here's going to be the plug: is like if you can't, right, for whatever reason, there's plenty of firms out there that can help you, right? Obviously, Zeroed In is one of those firms, but we do audit prep, we do transaction prep. We've been on both sides, so like we understand what needs to be done. And so feel free to reach out between now and audit time, but like we said, right, it's gonna start getting busy for everybody. So the sooner the better. Cool. All right. Well, thank you both for taking the time to chat with me about some cost savings and some success stories today and some pitfalls. But I hope this was good for everybody listening. And until next time.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Thanks.